Hello everyone, welcome to this Nature Research Academy's online webinar in partnership with the Egyptian Knowledge Bank in effective grant writing. Hi, my name is Hala and I'm going to be facilitating this webinar. I will be helping your trainer Dr.Refaee Shirley to run the polls and exercises, and I will be chairing the Q&A sessions. I will also be helping anyone who's having any technical difficulties. So, before I hand over to your trainer to get started, I will first show you how to use the GoToWebinar, and I'm going to explain how to navigate the GoToWebinar dashboard and how you'll be able to interact with us during this webinar. So please have the dashboard maximized just by clicking the orange arrow button at the top of the interface. As part of some exercises, we will ask you to raise your hand. The button with the picture of the hand allows you to do so. At the bottom of the interface, you will find the question box. Please type to us here if you are having any technical difficulties. If you have problems during the webinar, we recommend logging out and logging back in. You can use the same question box for questions or to respond to exercises. There will be a Q&A in the middle of the webinar and the final Q&A at the end. So please submit your questions and we will answer as many as we have time for. Your comment and the questions are private and only seen by us, the organizers. Finally, we'll be also asking to vote in some polls today. These polls will appear on the screen and you will be able to vote just by clicking on the screen. Great. So that cover all from my side. I will now hand over to your trainer, Dr.Refaee Shirley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hala, for the introduction there. And welcome everybody to today's workshop on effective grant writing. It's a pleasure to be here today and speak with the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. So we've got lots to talk about today, but before we do get started, I'd just like to make some key points. Well, firstly, I'd like to highlight to you that we have some handout materials for you today. These are yours to keep, so do download these. You can find them under the Handouts tab. So what you'll find is a participant guide for today's workshop. Within the guide, you'll see an agenda for today's sessions. I've also added some key points to take away from today's webinar. We will be going over activities today. You'll be able to see these within your guide. Maybe you've had a chance to look at these already. I've also added some useful online resources, which are really there to enrich all of the material that we're going to be covering today. Also, within the Handouts tab, I've uploaded the slides for today's workshop. Again, these are yours to keep. Do download all of this material, as I hope it will be useful for you to look back on all of the content that we're going to cover today. As I say, we will be covering quite a lot. So please do remember to download this material. Please let me also highlight to you today the exciting partnership between Springer Nature and Egypt. This partnership covers various services, including publishing and editing. Our agreements assist the transfer of knowledge from decades of experience at Springer Nature in order to promote research and knowledge economy for Egyptians and give research in Egypt international exposure. Starting in 2022, if you are a corresponding author affiliated with a participating Egyptian institution, you may be eligible to publish open access in our journals, with fees covered under a transformative agreement and fully open access agreement. This agreement covers all public, private, and national universities. So if you'd like to find out more about our open access agreement, please visit the URL in green for more information. That's bit.ly/EgyptOA. Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to that information. Also, before we get started today, please let me introduce myself. My name is Harry. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank you again for inviting me here to talk today. Let me give you a brief background of my career so far. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Nottingham in chemistry. After graduating from the University of Nottingham, I took up a PhD position at Queen Mary University of London. After finishing my PhD, which was again related to chemistry and medicinal chemistry, I moved to New Zealand and took up a research position at the University of Auckland. After that, I returned to the UK and took up a post at the University of Oxford. So, during my time in academia, I've published a broad portfolio of research papers, actually from a variety of different publishers. So, I'm an experienced author. Also, during my time in academia, I participated in the peer review process, both as an author, but also as a reviewer myself. Now I work at Springer Nature. My job title is Editorial Development Manager. A large part of my job at Springer Nature is conducting workshops such as this, where I want to help other researchers in various different aspects of their career. Many of my workshops are related to publishing skills, but other areas as well, such as grant writing. I'm sure many of the audience would have heard of Springer Nature before. We're a very large publisher. In fact, we have more than 3,000 journals. We're home to some very well-known brands. Nature Research, which has now actually been rebranded as the Nature Portfolio. This is where our flagship journals reside, such as Nature itself. But also, we have other parts of the company, Springer, who are a publisher of books, but also journals, and BMC, who are the largest open access publisher. Okay, great. Thank you for listening to some of those key points there. Now we can get started on today's workshop, where we're going to look at effective grant writing. Okay, we're going to look at the importance of research funding, how funders actually work, what the important things are to funders. Then we'll look at the grant peer review process. How are proposals reviewed? And what important aspects of a proposal will grant reviewers be looking at to establish the suitability and feasibility of a proposal? We'll be then finishing today by looking at some useful funding opportunities available to Egyptians, and actually this will mostly be focused on Horizon Europe. Okay, wonderful. Well, before we begin, let's have a think about the importance of funding within research. And actually, let's have a think. Try and imagine in your head a successful scientist. Maybe try and think of the most successful scientists you know. Now, what kind of common traits do successful scientists have? Start to think of some adjectives to describe them. Now, I've started this list for you. Intelligent. But what other common traits are there? Please write your answer in the question box. Great, some suggestions starting to come in from our audience. I can see a couple of suggestions for creative, persistence, hard worker. communicator with stakeholders. Really lots of suggestions here for hard worker, and I think that's a really good suggestion. Good reader, somebody has written knowledge, access to materials and tools, and innovation. I think these are all brilliant suggestions, and somebody's written teamwork and ambitious. Yeah, I think they're all brilliant suggestions, and yeah, so I agree with all of these suggestions. I've also added some of my own suggestions here. I think scientists are hardworking and passionate, aren't they? But they're also organized, innovative, passionate about their research. Okay, so scientists have all of these amazing attributes, right? I think scientists are some of the most intelligent and hardworking professionals on the planet. And also they work in a very challenging area of work. Science is hard, right? So we should be really proud of ourselves as scientists. But one thing I wanted to highlight to you, these attributes become irrelevant because the most important aspect of a successful scientist is actually that they have funding. The truth is, without funding, a scientist isn't able to allow all of these other amazing attributes to flourish. Funding is really the foundation for success, okay? Funding really drives successful research, and it allows the growth of researchers, but also of research projects, okay? Funding really can cover lots of various different things, can't it? We often think of funding as simply funding a research project, but there's actually many other resources that funding can help towards. Conference travel so that you can disseminate your work, building a track record through publications. It can help you hire people to work in your lab, such as PhD students. It can help you advance your own career through funding successful projects. Sometimes we need funding to pay for publications. But also funding allows us to network sometimes within research communities, as again, this conference travel or attending and visiting other professors. Indeed, funding can allow collaborations. It can allow you to purchase new and important equipment in order for your work to still be up to date and use up to date methods. So we should see funding as really one of the most important attributes of a successful scientist. So we should really think of funding as one of our priorities as a researcher. Okay, always have funding in mind. Plan ahead. Where are you going to be in a year's time, in 2 years' time? What funding will you have in the future? So do spend time of your day learning about grants, learning about funding. And of course, it's great that you're here today as we're going to be going over many of these issues and topics. Once you've learned about writing grants, devote time out of your day to write grants. This should be a large component of your day, okay? Also, do be sure to engage with other researchers internally. Perhaps talk to your supervisors and colleagues about funding opportunities, and also seek guidance in applying for funding yourself. Okay. So let's have a think about funding agencies. How are we going to get this funding? Well, one of the most important questions we need to ask ourselves is what are funding agencies actually looking for when they see an application, when they see a proposal for a project? Imagine the following, okay? You are part of an investment company with limited capital, so they have a limited amount of money. You have received several proposals from startup companies asking you to invest in them. What would you want to know about the company before agreeing to invest? Please write your answer in the question box. What would you like to know about the company. Great, some suggestions coming in. Their aims and goals, potentials, future plans, their mission, their professionality, their plan, what activities and budget they have planned, reputation of the owners, how will they spend the money, what profits and benefits do they see, what outcomes do they expect. Yeah, some great suggestions there from everybody. So yes, if you're an investment company, you need to know all of this information. You want to know what they have planned. You need to know what outcomes they expect. So investment companies are very similar to funding and scholarship agencies. They have similar challenges when deciding which grants to accept. Now, really, investment companies want proposals that are low risk, and the same with funding bodies. They want projects that are likely to succeed. Of course, they don't want to waste their money. And remember, funding agencies are often going to be supported by the public or private companies or perhaps charitable funds, and therefore they need to be careful how they use their money. So yes, investment companies and funding agencies both want low risk proposals, but they also actually want a high return. They want to benefit from the success of the company or the success of the research project if we're talking about funding agencies. So funding agencies hope that the project will be low risk and high return. What do we mean by return when we're talking about a funding project? Really, we're talking about impact. They hope that the project will generate an impact through its findings within the research community. Okay, they will provide meaningful and useful results. Okay, brilliant. But there is an issue for you as a researcher. Funding agencies only have a limited amount of funding. There's not an infinite amount of money that a funding agency can give to research communities. Okay, the problem is associated with the fact that there's many other researchers to compete with that money. So applying for funding is a highly competitive area of opportunity. Okay, so what does this mean for you? Well, it means when you apply for funding, you need to make sure that your proposal stands out. Your proposal needs to be better than all of the other proposals that are being submitted. So we need to spend time understanding what the funding agency is looking for when evaluating your proposal. Okay, we need our proposal to be competitive. So let's have a think about what grant reviewers are looking at when they evaluate a manuscript. Okay, so let's have a think about the reviewing process. Now, the grant review process is actually similar to the peer review process in publishing. We submit in publishing, we write our manuscript, we submit the manuscript to a journal, and then we have the peer review process. The paper is sent to peer reviewers who evaluate the manuscript, and then they will provide a recommendation to the journal editor. The editor will then make the final decision. The paper will then either be accepted or rejected. Okay, so that's the typical peer review process. Now, the grant review process is fairly similar. A proposal is submitted to a funding body. The proposal will then be sent to reviewers. These will be experts within the field, similar to peer reviewers. In the publishing process, the reviewers will then evaluate the proposal and provide their recommendation to the review board. The review board will make the final decision, and then at the end of the process, typically, the proposal will either be funded or rejected. Okay, so we need to be able to navigate this grant review process successfully. It's a really important process in funding bodies deciding what projects to fund. Okay, the funding bodies want to fund the best projects. Also, remember, like we said, the lower risk projects and the ones that are likely to have a high return. They're going to generate impact in their research community. So within a grant review, they'll be assessing various different aspects of a project. They'll be assessing the quality of the proposal, the feasibility of the proposal, how relevant is the proposal to the research community. Okay, so the reviewers really are acting as a filter. Okay, and only the proposals that have all of the relevant attributes will make it through to successful funding. Okay, so let's have a think about what grant reviewers are actually looking at when they review a project. Really, we can split it into two parts. We have the applicant, but we also have the project. And let's have a think about this in some more detail. They will be assessing you as an individual. You're the applicant. Let's have a think about what attributes of you as a researcher, as an applicant, they will be thinking about. Well, they'll be thinking about the qualifications that you have, the skills that you've built up in your career so far. A reputation, have you built up a good track record for yourself? Also, your past performance. What success have you previously had in other projects? Publications. How many publications do you have? Where have you published? And have your publications been impactful in your research community? They'll also be assessing the environment. Where are you going to be doing the project? Do you have access to all of the facilities that you need? Let's have a think about all of these key attributes in a bit more detail then. So, as I've said, they'll be looking at the skills that you have, okay? Now, importantly, they'll be assessing whether you have the skills relevant to the research proposal. Will you be able to successfully implement all of the aims that you've suggested in your proposal? Do you have previous experience of using the methods and techniques within the proposal? So they'll simply be asking, does the applicant have the skills? What is their training? Where have they worked previously? What other previous projects have they conducted where they've been able to demonstrate these skills? Or indeed, if you don't yet have the skills, have they demonstrated in their proposal a plan to begin learning and developing skills? One way to develop and learn skills that we're not yet familiar with is through collaboration. So if you want to implement new skills into your proposal, you may want to work with a fellow expert who has greater experience in a certain skill. Okay. So in our proposal, we need to clearly highlight to the reviewers all of the relevant previous work and experiences where we've been able to demonstrate the precise skills required in the research project. Okay. So the next attribute that we can think about is reputation. What important contributions has this researcher made in their career so far? Okay. Have you been awarded any important prestigious awards? Have you been invited to any prestigious conferences and done any talks, or perhaps poster presentations? Or perhaps you have professional memberships. Are you a member of a professional body? All of these are positive attributes, right? But also remember, reputations can be bad. The reviewers might be considering if there are any red flags. Perhaps you've had publications in the past withdrawn. Perhaps you've had ethical issues arise when publishing, or perhaps when conducting a project. So they'll also be looking as to whether there's any concerns with you as an applicant. So in your application, you really want to highlight all of your amazing achievements, any awards, any important contributions that you've made clearly to the reviewers. Be proud of all of the amazing things you've done in your career so far, and make sure the reviewer is aware of all of the things that you've achieved to demonstrate your good reputation within your research field. Reviewers will actually also be looking at your past performance to establish whether you're likely to achieve the goals in this project. So what they want to see is successful projects that you've finished in the past. Okay. Will you achieve the goals outlined in your proposal? So within our application, we need to demonstrate that we've performed in the past. Now, this may be through highlighting your publications, but it also can be highlighting your previous grant success, demonstrating that other funding bodies have found you to be a good applicant, and they've obviously decided to fund your previous projects. This will make the reviewers have greater confidence in your proposal. Really, we want to be demonstrating our track record for success, okay? So do be sure in your application to provide examples of your previous successes in whichever way you can, whether this is publications, grant success, perhaps talking at conferences, or highlighting some of your previous experiences related to success. Okay. Great. So one of the other things that the reviewers will be looking at is your qualifications. They'll simply be looking at your academic background. Where did they do their schooling? Where did they go to university? When did they finish at university? And when did they finish their PhD? Okay. So they really want to see that you've got all of the qualifications required for funding. Okay. But they'll also be interested to see if you have any professional qualifications. Have you done training courses related to management, project management? These can demonstrate a good impression to the reviewers and help them build up that confidence in your ability to conduct yourself in a professional way, that you experienced, learn how to manage a project well. So do think about all of the qualifications you have, not only your PhD, but beyond, okay? So within your application, it can be important to highlight your academic timeline, provide them with dates, but also highlight to them your ongoing learning and development, courses that you've taken recently to continue learning and developing, okay? As we've said, one of the other considerations when looking at an applicant will actually be the environment that they work in. Simply, where is the project going to be done? And what facilities do they have? Do you have the facilities resources, and equipment required in order to implement the aims of your project. Do you have the equipment required to perform the techniques that you've outlined in your proposal? They'll also be considering what people you have as resources. Do you have a research group already established who can support the project? But also, what other colleagues do you have who may be influential in your project but may be good guidance throughout the course of your career? So we'll really be considering the environment that you work in and whether this is going to be a good environment for your project. Okay, so do be sure in your application to demonstrate that you have access to everything that you will need for the project to be successful. Okay, so that's really the key attributes that they'll be looking at when establishing whether the applicant is a potential to be funded. As we've said, they'll also be looking at the project. And I think there are 6 key attributes here when we're thinking about the project. They'll be thinking about the originality of the project proposal. Is this a new idea? Are the aims and methods outlined clearly? Can the reviewer actually understand precisely what you aim to do and why you aim to do it? They'll be assessing overall quality, understanding of how good is the proposal. And we'll be talking about exactly what we mean by quality in the next slide, but we'll also be thinking about the relevance of your project. Does your project matter to your research community and beyond? Is the research question that you're going to aim to answer a worthy one to answer? Remember, funding bodies only have so much money, so therefore they need to be mindful of where that money goes. So is your project relevant and important to your research community? But also they'll be thinking about diversity, and this is becoming a more and more common aspect of funding bodies considerations. They'll be thinking, is this project diverse? Are you including a diverse range of researchers within your team, for example? So let's have a think about some of these in some more detail. So as I've said, they will be thinking about the overall quality of your project. And of course, quality can be quite hard to define, but really, are they impressed by your proposal? Do they think it's an impressive way to answer the research question? Okay. But also they'll be thinking about rigor and completeness. Also, they'll be thinking, is the proposal innovative? So we need to think about how we can demonstrate that our project is quality. So we want to be sure that we're thorough when we explain why our project needs to be done, what the research question of our project is, and what the aims of our project are. We want to be sure to not miss anything out, okay? But then also we want to provide guidance about the techniques and tools and methods that you're going to use in your project. So I do also recommend generating a good research question. Make sure that your research question is an important one for your research community. One way to help your reviewer understand the importance of your research question is through providing ample context for your study. So we want to provide lots of background information in order for them to understand why our research question is important, okay? So one of the other attributes that we've already highlighted is clarity. And this is really important for your reviewers. They need to understand what your proposal really means. They need to understand why your proposal is important. One way to do that, as we've said already, is to provide clear background information for the reviewers. They need to also understand what you actually aim to do. So we want to be sure to describe our aims thoroughly and clearly within the proposal. I do recommend using clear language throughout the course of your proposal. So use simple English, use short sentences, as to not frustrate the reviewer. If things in the proposal are not clear, your reviewer may become frustrated. You want to keep the reviewer on your side. You want to keep them feeling positive and enthusiastic about your proposal. So do be sure to explain things clearly throughout your proposal. Okay, the next part of the project that the reviewers may be looking at is originality. We really want our proposal to be new. It needs to be new and provide a novel proposal to our research field. So the reviewers will be thinking, how novel is this proposal? They'll of course, to establish novelty, they'll be looking at your objectives and aims, okay? They want to see that you're highlighting and establishing new approaches to important research questions. Are you providing any possibility for innovation within your proposal? So, how can you highlight novelty or innovation in your proposal? Please write your answer in the question box. Great, some suggestions coming in. Identify the knowledge gap and how we can overcome this effectively. And by writing a new idea or technique that will be implemented or used in your research. Yeah, some great suggestions there from everybody. And Sarah has written review of literature. Yes, I think that's a great suggestion. Actually, a great way to highlight the novelty of your proposal is to highlight previous work in a literature review. Previous studies will emphasize the novelty of your work. We want to explain current gaps of knowledge or limitations within the research field. So we do want to provide that context for our study. So guide the reader clearly through all of this information. Okay. One of the next attributes that will be under consideration is the feasibility for your project. And remember, as we said earlier, many funders want low-risk projects with a high return. So they'll simply be asking themselves, are the aims of your study achievable? Are you likely to achieve them? What level of risk is there that it's not going to work at all? So you really want to help ensure the reviewer that your work is feasible. And you may want to be using previous studies, previous experiences to help reassure them. Preliminary results can be really useful to help reassure your reviewer that the project is likely to be successful. So as I say, provide that sufficient background information and explain the risk levels of your project plan, okay? Another important attribute that will be under consideration is the timeliness of your project. Is your project relevant now? Not 5 years ago, but today. Does your project matter? Is your proposal relevant? So, is it topical? Okay, does it address issues within your research field that are currently important? Also, when establishing relevance, do be sure that the proposal that you're submitting is actually within the scope of the publisher, of the funder. Some funders will only be looking for certain topics to fund. So do be sure that your project is within scope. We also want to be sure that our project is going to be impactful, but it's going to be relevant both within your research field, but also wider society. What's the impact and relevance of your proposal for wider society, or perhaps medical practice? So you do want to explain why your proposal is currently important and the implications of your study. Now, the last thing that we'll discuss today is diversity of your project. And this is, as I say, becoming increasingly more and more common. The reviewers will often ask, is this going to be an inclusive and diverse team? You do want to highlight the diversity of your team. It can be hard to know exactly what the funders are after here, so also do make sure you read the diversity requirements clearly in the funding documents. Okay, so here's a few examples I wanted to give you. So this is an example from a funder called the EPSRC. This is a European funding body. Now, their stance on equality, diversity, and inclusion is that they are ensuring that the activities we support and the research that we fund drives change in our community and supports a system that is inclusive for everyone. Okay. And here's another example, and this is from Horizon Europe, where you're expected to fill in a gender equality plan. And you'll be asked to address all of these points. First question being, does the organization have a gender equality plan covering the elements listed below? So do be sure whether you're aware whether your institution, organization does have a gender equality plan or has other ways to support various different aspects of diversity, equality, and inclusion. This will be an important part of your proposal and a consideration that the reviewers will make when deciding whether to fund your project. Okay. Great. Well, we're going to go on to the first activity today, and you'll see this on page 5 of your participant guide. So I've given you here 4 topics that could be of interest to a funding agency. Now, I'm just going to give the audience 2 minutes to read over these different topics. After that, I'll be asking you some questions about them. So I'll just leave this on the screen for 2 minutes. Okay, I hope everybody's had a chance to read over those different topics. We'll now be going through each one at a time, actually, and I'll be asking you some questions. So, for topic one, exploration of interlayer excitons in 2D, 1D van der Waals heterostructures for the development of novel photonic devices such as excitonic transistors and photodiodes. So, the first question I'd like to ask is, do you think this project would be of interest to funding agencies? Hala, could we please launch the first poll?
Dr. Harry, so you have now, you can see the poll on your screen. Please select one answer and I will be sharing the results. Great, so I can see the majority voted. I will wait for extra 10 seconds and then I will close the poll and share the results with you. Dr. Harry, you can now see the results on the screen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hala. I can see a large part of the audience have actually gone for no, 76%. So we don't like this project overall. Interesting. Let's hide that poll, please, Hala. So in the question box, please let me know what you like or what you dislike about this project. One attendee has written, no, I can't understand the project. Too much jargon. But it's not clear. Limited impact. It is difficult to understand. Yeah, thank you everybody for letting me know. I think you're right. I think without the context and the background information, it's actually hard to understand exactly what this project is going to entail. So remember in your proposal how important it is to provide that background information. Somebody's written not of interest to the public. We also, of course, need to provide our reviewer with what the impact of our study is going to be. Why does our study matter? I think it's likely that a project like this could be of interest to a funder. Van der Waals heterostructures are quite an emerging area of research, many different types of purpose, such as transistors. But yes, thank you for your thoughts on that project. So here I've got a different topic: development of ultra thin separation membranes for water treatment in urban regions of Egypt. Do you think this project would be of interest to funding agencies? Hala, could we please launch poll 2?
Yes, sure, Dr. Harry. The poll is now available on the screen, so please select your answer. Thank you everyone for your participation. I will now close the poll, and you can now see the results on the screen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hala, and thank you to our wonderful audience for participating in the poll. And I can see many of our attendees have gone for yes there, 85% going for yes. Okay, that's great to see. Could we please hide the poll, Hala? Now, I agree that this could potentially be a really useful project to fund, but can we think of a limitation of this proposal? What can be improved with this project to make it more likely to be funded? Can we think of anything that could be changed or improved about it? Great, some suggestions coming in. In rural areas as well, explain the benefits to the public and including the cost. Yeah, some great suggestions. So for me, one of the limitations of this study is it's confined to a very selective and specific geographic areas, right? We're just talking about urban regions of Egypt. For the study to be more impactful and more relevant to a wider group of people, it may be worthwhile including rural areas, or why not just include other countries as well? Is the study going to be relevant to other regions outside of Egypt and therefore more relevant to a wider population? Can the study be internationally relevant? So that may be one consideration that um, the applicants may want to consider. Okay, whether they want to include other regions of Egypt or other countries altogether to make the work more impactful and relevant. Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for engaging in that activity. We do now have time for a break. So please use this as an opportunity to stretch your legs. After the break, we will have time for a question and answer session. So if you have any questions at all, please do put these into the question box. And I look forward to answering all of your questions after the break. But for now, please do enjoy your break. Wonderful. Well, I hope everybody has enjoyed a short break. As promised, we do have time for a question and answer session. So if you have any questions, please do put these into the question box. So, Hala, do we have any questions at all from our audience?
Yes, Harry, we do have a lot of questions. So, the first question we received in the question box, does this mean that the fresh researcher doesn't have a chance for funding?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So the attendee has said, does this mean that a fresh researcher does not have a chance to get research funding? And I think this refers to earlier when we spoke about building a track record and having previous publications, experiences, demonstrating that you've built up skills. Now, it's unlikely that a PhD student is going to be applying for funding. This guidance I'm providing you for today is for researchers who are perhaps at the postdoctoral level. In order to apply for research funding, you do need to have built up that track record, whether this be some publications, whether this be having worked on a number of projects, having attended conferences, for example. So this is why that it's important during the course of your PhD that you get involved and have as many experiences as possible. Make sure that you do publish during the course or after your PhD to establish that track record so that eventually in the future you can apply for research funding and you'll be a good applicant. So yes, as I say, do use your PhD as an opportunity to build up this track record. Thank you so much for the question.
Great. And the following question we have is the reviewers sometimes refuse the project because it has some previous data. They said it may be repetition, although we should write previous data to check our seriousness in implementation. So, how we can solve this problem?
So thank you so much for the question. I think here the attribute that the reviewers are concerned about is novelty. Okay, they're concerned that your proposal, your work is not new. So it's important in your application that you highlight clearly to the reviewers what your novel contribution is going to be. It's okay to use previous data. We encourage the reuse of data frequently. But what contribution is your proposal going to make to your research field? What impact is your work going to have? What's the novelty of your work? So do be sure to provide sufficient background information in your application in order to help the reviewers understand the novelty, the importance of your actual proposal itself. Okay, thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Harry. And we have another question. What funding opportunities are there for Egyptians?
Great, thank you so much for the question. What funding opportunities are there for Egyptians? Now, there's a number of funding bodies available for Egyptians, and we won't be covering all of these today, but in the second half of today's workshop, I did want to highlight some key important opportunities for Egyptians. In particular, we'll be highlighting opportunities available for you through Horizon Europe. So I hope you find the second half of this workshop useful. Thank you so much for the question. Do we have any more
Thank you
questions at
so
all?
No, Dr. Harry, we don't have any. Actually, we have one or two questions, so I think we can take one of them and we can answer the rest in the second Q&A. So we have a question here. It's how to find and select a funding agency based on our different specialties.
Yes, well, that's a brilliant question. Now, one key recommendation I have for you is to talk to colleagues, talk to other researchers about funding opportunities available for you, as there's no simple way to find funding opportunities. It's really important to become aware of different funders within your discipline, but also funders that cover multiple disciplines. The funding agencies that we're going to cover this afternoon are ones that cover many different types of discipline. And therefore, these may be a useful resource for you to start learning about funding.
Great. Thank you a lot, Dr. Harry. And please, thank you everyone for sending your questions. So please, if you have any other question, type to us in the question box, and we will make sure to answer all the question at the end of the first webinar. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hala, for your help there. And thank you to our audience for those brilliant questions. I look forward to our second Q&A session at the end of today's workshop. So let's now have a think about where funding is available. We've covered so far in today's workshop the grant review process and what reviewers are looking for in an application. So let's have a think about where you can actually get funding from now. So main focus of this second half is going to be on Horizon Europe, but I did also want to highlight some other opportunities available for Egyptian researchers. The first funding body to highlight to you is Wellcome Trust. These cover research from any discipline. The overall aims of the schemes is for all improvement of human life, health, and well-being. So if your study covers these, your proposal may cover these different aspects, you may want to consider exploring the Wellcome Trust. And it will cover early career researchers and middle income countries, including those in Egypt. Okay, many of the funding opportunities are for 5 years, but if you're a mid-career researcher, you may find opportunities for 8 years. So do explore opportunities available for you at the Wellcome Trust. As you can see here, there's various different awards. The other funder I would like to highlight to you this afternoon is this morning, is the Newton Fund and Global Challenges Research Fund. These are managed by the UK's Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So these funds allow researchers and innovators around the world to find lasting solutions to global challenges such as human health, food security, and climate change. Okay, so the Newton Fund in particular builds research and innovation partnerships with countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So, of course, including Egypt. Okay, it's really there to support economic development and social welfare and tackle global challenges, as we've said. Okay, so do consider the Newton Fund. As you can see here in particular, there's the Newton Sharafa Fund, which is eligible for Egyptian researchers. Okay, they highlight a number of priorities that they have in the Newton Fund for Egypt. As you can see, these cover climate change, cultural heritage, food security, health, medicine, and well-being, but other things such as water resources, new and renewable energy, and cross-cutting issues. Okay, so these are mutually identified priorities between the UK and Egypt. Okay, these priorities may not cover everything that they currently fund. So do explore these opportunities at the Newton Fund. Also, I'd like to highlight to you this morning the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine. These are a private non-profit institution that provide expert advice on some of the most pressing challenges facing the nation and world. As you can see, they have the US, Egypt Science and Technology Joint Fund. Okay, and this will be eligible for a wide range of disciplines. So do be sure to explore this funding opportunity from the National Academies for Science, Engineering, Medicine. Okay. Brilliant. Now, as I have said today, we're going to have a large focus on Horizon Europe. This is an expansive funding body. Okay, this is the latest framework for research funding within Europe, but many other member states outside of the EU, including Egypt. So Egyptians are fully eligible to apply for funding from Horizon Europe. This, as I've said, is expansive. It covers almost 96 billion euros. Okay, and it's going to be running from 2021 to 2027. Okay, so let's have a think about some of the key missions within Horizon Europe. It's important to highlight these, but it's also useful to know if your research is outside of these key missions, it's likely that you still will be able to find opportunities within the framework. As I said, the framework is very large, but these really are the key missions from Horizon Europe. The first one, conquering cancer. Second, accelerating transition to a climate-ready, climate-resilient Europe. Regenerating our oceans and waters. And then second one, related to climate change, 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. The last one being caring for the soil. Okay, so you can see that lots of these are related to climate change and pollution, but also the number one mission being that health related cancer mission. So have a think about whether any of your research align with these key missions for Horizon Europe. So this is the framework for Horizon Europe. There are three main parts, which are commonly called pillars. Because it is so huge and there are so many different opportunities, today we're not going to be able to cover all of these, but I did want to today highlight the most relevant pillars for Egyptian researchers seeking funding in science research. Okay, so as we can see, we have three pillars. Pillar 1, excellent science. Pillar 2, global challenges and European industrial competitiveness. And Pillar 3, innovative Europe. So I did want to highlight Pillar 1 to you to start with. As we've said, this pillar is called excellent science. This pillar is really all about maintaining and reinforcing the excellent science base within Europe. Okay, there are three components, and these are the European Research Council, the Mary Skłodowska-Curie, and research infrastructures. This pillar has no predefined topics, okay, meaning that your proposal can really be on any topic. So Pillar 1 really is an exciting chance for innovation. So let's have a think about the first part of Pillar 1, which is excellent science. This, as we say, covers European Research Council, Mary Skłodowska-Curie actions, and research infrastructures. So the first part being European Research Council. Let's have a think about this. So the main features of the European Research Council are scientific excellence. Scientific excellence really is the only evaluation criteria. So they judge excellence by both the applicant and the proposed project. And as we discussed earlier in today's workshop, we know that some of the key considerations will be when looking at the applicant or the project. So this is quite a unique part of the Horizon Europe framework. As we've said, the only criteria is scientific excellence. This is unique, as many other pillars will have more predefined topics. This is an opportunity for researchers to come with any topic. This topic is far more exploratory and higher risk and higher reward than others. Okay, so in order to be eligible for the European Research Council, You must be within an EU state or associated nation. Egypt is indeed an associated nation. But grants are actually portable, meaning if you're successful in gaining funding, you can take your funding to any university within the EU or associated nation. Okay, so within the European Research Council, there are 4 key types of grant. Okay, the first one being the starting grant, and this will be for 1.5 million euros up to and over a period of 5 years. Now, this is really to support excellent researchers 2 to 7 years after they have finished their PhD. So many of the different grants available within the European Research Council are based upon years since a researcher has finished their PhDs. So the starting grant is most likely to be the most relevant to our audience today, but there is the consolidator grant, advanced grant, and synergy grant. As you can see, these are for different amounts of money and they're to support researchers over different periods after their PhD. So the consolidator is for 7 years after the PhD, and then the advanced and synergy grants are really for established researchers. Did want to provide you today with some tentative dates. So the starting grant will be opening on the 12th of July this year. So you have plenty of time to start preparing for that, and then the starting grant will close at the end of October. As you see here, I've also highlighted the opening dates for the other grants, so you may want to quickly make a note of these dates. As I say, plenty of time to prepare for these deadlines for the European Research Council. I do recommend exploring the European Research Council webpage. They'll provide you information on grants that are currently open and grants that are going to be opening soon, and also any news items that may be useful for you in your application. So do keep up to date with any changes on the European Research Council website. Okay. So the next part of Pillar 1 is the Mary Sklodowska-Curie actions. The second program really is about supporting the mobility training and career development of researchers. Okay, so in order to be eligible for Mary Sklodowska-Curie actions, you must be mobile. What does this mean? Well, you must have had no more than 12 months in the last 3 years in the same place. So you need to be sure that you're a researcher who's willing to be mobile, to work at many different research institutions in different countries. Okay. They do also have postdoctoral fellowship opportunities. This is for skills development and training. So this is the first action that I really wanted to introduce you to. This is really all about career development and training for researchers who hold a PhD. This is only eligible if you finished your PhD up to 6 years ago. Okay, so this is a very popular scheme, and there are some limitations on resubmission. You may be only allowed to submit once a year. Okay. But we also have doctoral networks within the Mary Sklodowska-Curie actions. This is wanted to highlight this to you today. This is for several different organizations to join forces to offer doctoral training to 10 to 15 doctoral candidates. Okay, calls will typically open between June and November for the doctoral networks. Okay, so do be sure to explore these opportunities, both at the European Research Council, but also Mary Sklodowska-Curie actions. Okay, let's move on now to Pillar 2. Pillar 2 has the goal to fund research that tackles challenges that we all face. For example, harmful emissions or tackling common diseases such as obesity. So one striking difference between Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 is that Pillar 2 has predefined topics, okay? Also, to be eligible for opportunities within Pillar 2, the application must be from 3 different institutions in 3 different countries. So of course, networking is essential in order to establish potential collaborators for this application. So do consider Pillar 2 really as a highly collaborative opportunity for researchers. So as we said, Pillar 2 has these predefined topics. Before we discuss some of the topics which will be covered within this pillar, I think it's useful to discuss how the pillar essentially works. As mentioned, there is a focus on tackling challenges we face every day. The EU Commission will consult various researchers to decide what are the most important research questions within society. What are the most important problems within society? For example, childhood obesity has been recognized as a key problem for society. A call will typically define an expected outcome, okay, scope, and what areas of research will be covered. It is then the job of the applicant or you to explain in your proposal a solution to the problem. Okay. So remember, Pillar 1, the evaluation criteria was scientific excellence only. But now in Pillar 2, excellence is important, but impact to society, the environment is important as well. Okay. The non-scientific impact is just as important as the scientific impact. So in order to be successful in applying for opportunities in Pillar 2, your solution to the problem needs to be outstanding, okay? You'll be having many other researchers submitting other solutions to the same problem. So you need to make sure that your application stands out, okay? So within Pillar 2, we have 6 clusters, which cover as many research topics as possible. We have health, culture, creativity, and inclusive societies, civil security for society, digital industry and space, climate, energy, and mobility, food, bioeconomy, natural resources, and environment. Okay, so let's have a think about what details there are within these 6 clusters. So I think the most important cluster for our audience today is going to be the health cluster. So I did want to highlight some of these to you today. So there are 6 fields where topics will be launched every year for the next 6 years, and these are the topics currently launched. Okay. So the first one under health is staying healthy in a rapidly changing society. So an example of a topic relevant to this would be childhood obesity. Second one is living and working in a health promoting environment. So there's no definition of types of diseases, but really an emphasis on reducing and preventing diseases under this topic. Okay. And similarly, tackling diseases and reducing burden. There's no definition on the types of disease, but an emphasis on reducing and preventing. The fourth one, is innovative, sustainable, and quality healthcare. This really has a focus to make healthcare systems more resilient and dynamic. Okay. The fifth one is technology and digital solutions for a healthy society. This really is likely to have a focus on big data and artificial intelligence to provide improvements to treatments. Okay. And finally, maintaining an innovative, sustainable, and competitive industry. This may focus perhaps on funding new technologies to bring them to patients. Okay, great. So now we've looked at some of those key opportunities for you. I did want to highlight the funding and tenders portal. This is a useful platform where you can explore opportunities available through the expansive and wide Horizon Europe framework. So do feel free to Google funding and tenders portal. This will take you to this platform. I've also provided you with the URL here at the top of the page. So this is what the funding and tender portal looks like. Within here, you will find the opportunity to search for funding and tenders. So this here highlighted in yellow will then open up this search toolbar where you can search for different funding opportunities within her Horizon Europe framework. As you can see here, you can select what program you're interested in looking at. So as we can see here, we have many of the programs that we've just previously discussed: the European Research Council, Mary Sklodowska-Curie Actions, and Pillar 2 as well, Global Challenges and European Industrial Competitiveness. Okay, so you can search for these different programs and see what calls are currently open or which ones are going to be forthcoming. As we can see, when I did this search, the ERC Consolidator grants were open for submission. So you can click on any of these grants and find out more information about them. Okay, they'll provide you guidance on how to submit your application. They'll give you the deadline date as well, so do be sure to submit it before the deadline. As you can see here, they've provided you with the objectives of the Consolidator grant and eligibility conditions. Okay, so do be sure to check that you're eligible for the funding opportunity. You'll notice here under the objectives how they've written, principal investigators must demonstrate the groundbreaking nature, ambition, and feasibility of their scientific proposal. Notice how this loops into many of the topics, many of the criteria we were talking about earlier. Are already highlighting they expect the proposal to be feasible, to demonstrate originality, but quality as well. Okay. They're also highlighting that this opportunity is only available for people who've had their PhD in the last 7 years, and they want the applicant to have several important publications as main author, or without the participation of their PhD supervisor. So again, this is going back to what we discussed earlier. They're already highlighting they expect the applicant to have demonstrated past performance, reputation, and also suitable qualifications. Okay. So if you feel that you're eligible for submission, then you can start your submission using the funding and tenders portal. Okay. But only start your submission if you've checked that you're eligible, you have the support of your research institution, you're able to demonstrate this suitable past performance, but also that you have a good idea for a proposal. Okay, make sure you have the time dedicated to writing your proposal. As we said earlier, it's really important that your proposal stands out. Great. Well, we're going to go to the next activity today, and you'll see this on page 5 of your participant guide. So in this activity, I've provided you with 3 applicants. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes to read over these applicants. Then I'm going to ask you which applicant could be most appealing to a funder. Okay, I hope everybody has had a chance to read over those different applicants. Hala, could we please launch the next poll?
Yes, sure. So you can now see the poll on your screen. Please select one answer. Thank you.
Hala, um, sorry about that. That's my mistake. We've launched the wrong poll. Sorry about that. We want to close that poll now, and then can we relaunch? Can we launch the last poll, which is which applicant may be most appealing to a funder?
Yes, sure, Dr. Hari. So uh, you can now see the right poll on the screen, which applicant may be most appealing to a funder. So please select one answer and I will be sharing the results with you shortly. Thank you. Great. Thank you a lot, everyone, for your participation. So I will now close the poll, and you can now see the results on your screen.
Great, thank you so much, Hala, and thank you to our wonderful audience. So interesting to see that 65% of the audience have gone for B there, but then almost a third have gone for C. So thanks again for participating in the poll. Let's hide that, please, Hala. So I think Dr. Yoon actually is probably the most appealing funder. But let's go through each of these one at a time. The first one was Professor Mountbatten. Now, they are an esteemed researcher. They do currently have 2 current grants. They have been able to establish this track record. And their work is on the human gut microbiome, which is quite a topical and timely area of research. But Professor Mountbatten has not published in the last 7 years. So this is a red flag. This would be a concern to the funders, okay? But funders will also consider extenuating circumstances. Perhaps Professor Mountbatten has been ill, so they would take this into account as well. Nevertheless, I don't think Mountbatten is the most appealing funder. So we had option C, which was Professor Yoon. Now I think Professor Yoon is the best, most appealing funder. They work in a crucial area of research, coronavirus, very timely, very important and relevant to a wide population. And they've got an impressive track record. They've recently published a very high impact paper in Science. And he is getting invited to international conferences. So he's got this track record. ability to prove his reputation, and he really shows himself as a rising star with lots of exciting potential. Okay, and the last option was Professor Helau. So she does have one impressive grant, which is good, and she does have lots of publications, but they're actually in low tier papers. So she's not publishing impactful work, and her works focus on structurally intriguing fatty acids. This really doesn't indicate that it's impactful, relevant, timely work that she is working on. It seems more like academic intrigue. So she's an okay applicant. I don't think she's a good applicant as Professor Yoon, because her work is really not impactful, relevant, or timely as much as Professor Yoon's is, at least in a way. Great. Well, thank you everybody for engaging in that activity. We do now have time for our question and answer session. So if you have any questions at all, please put these into the question box. So, Hala, do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes, Dr. Hari, we have some questions in the question box. So the first question we received, do you have to have a European partner in first pillar funding opportunities?
Thank you so much for the question. No, you do not have to have a partner in Europe to be eligible for funding within Pillar 1, as long as you're an associated nation, and Egypt are indeed an associated nation. So yes, you would be eligible without having a partner within Europe. Thank you so much for the question.
Great. And another question we just received, how to increase my chance to get grant without being a previous grant recipient?
Yep, well, you need to be able to demonstrate your track record through other means. Okay, so you need to demonstrate that you've published your work, that you attend conferences, that you've built up a good reputation. But also, you need to demonstrate that your work is important. So, in your application, you need to be highlighting why your research question is important and why your objectives and your aims are quality and they appropriately address the research question. So it's all about demonstrating the track record that you have to the best of your ability, then making sure that your proposal is a good quality proposal.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hari. And we received another question in the question box. So, which is better to start for grant writing? Is it to explore the interest of funding organization and writing our proposal according to that? Or it's better for us to just choose our need and try to convince the organization and sell our idea to them?
Okay, Hella. Can
Yes,
I
Dr.
ask?
Harry. Yes,
Yeah,
Dr. Harry, did you hear my question?
I did. I would like to read it because it was quite long. Is it in the question box?
Yes, it was in the question box. And this is the question,
Yeah.
as you can see, it's
What
sent
time?
at 11:08.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah. Okay, just give me 1 second. Yes, that's a brilliant question. It's really important to understand the ambitions of the funding agency. So before considering to apply, read lots on the funder's website. What are their ambitions? What topics of interest have they expressed? Um, they may have predefined topics that they expect researchers to abide by, or some funders, as we've seen in the Horizon Europe framework, are open to any topics being explored. So just learn about the individual funder. Um, if they do have interests clearly stated on the website, you really want to make sure that your proposal aligns with their individual interests, their scopes, their aims. Otherwise, you're unlikely to be accepted within that organization. So, yes, try and find a funder that's suitable for your proposal. Now, that would be my guidance for you. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harry, and thank you everyone for your participation and engagement in today's webinar. And thank you for sending your valuable questions. Thank you, Dr. Harry, for all of your efforts today and for the very informative Q&A and helping our participant by answering all of their questions. So I will now hand over again to Dr. Harry for final words. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hala, for all of your help today. And thank you to our wonderful audience for all of their brilliant participation. So we will be having a lunch break now. After the lunch break, we'll be continuing our second part of today's workshop, where we will be continuing our discussion of effective grant writing. We'll be looking at ways to prepare a good research question and how to actually go about writing an effective proposal yourself. Thank you again, everybody, for coming this morning, and I look forward to seeing you all after the lunch break. Thank you again, everybody, and thank you, Hala. We can now end this workshop.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope you have enjoyed this virtual workshop. We are waiting for you during the second webinar that will start at 1 p.m. Cairo time. I will now end the webinar. Goodbye.